Perfect. So, hi everyone. My name is Jack. For the last year, I was running the social media of the CSC, and before that, I was PRO of Trinity Musical Theatre Society uh, in 2019, 2020. During that year, we won Best Online Presence. Outside of college, I was the marketing associate for Irish Youth Musical Theatre, run in tandem with the Royal Irish Academy of Music. And I am currently assistant producer with Landmark Productions. So I'm going to be talking today about maximizing your social media presence. So as we all know, it's become a really big part of everything that we're doing this year, especially in the last year where it has really become one of the main mediums of interaction between societies and their members. And hopefully this year we'll see a return to some normality, hopefully by the end of it. But at the same time, it's still really useful to kind of understand the ins and outs of social media and how you can really use it to maximize your engagement, really share what you're doing with society or your society members, but then also how you can really interact with other stakeholders within the college, be it the college itself or alumni or different bodies within the college, such as the global room or anyone else. So perfect. I'm just going to get started here. So I think like the most basic thing to do is to really go back to basics and understand the voice of your society. So really understanding the tone, how your society, looks, how your society comes across online. Obviously in the last year, there have been almost like no opportunities to really meet for societies to really meet their members apart from say Zoom or I don't know if there were brief chances of interaction when restrictions were eased at some point last year. So, the majority of how people perceive your society really comes from social media. So I think really understanding the voice of your society is central to how you can maximize your own social media presence. So when I say voice of your society, I'm really talking about the tone of how you come across. So that isn't just in written posts, but it's also in social media graphics, stories, videos, any sort of way in which your society is putting out content. I really think your society's voice is central to that. And so like I really find a useful exercise is to brainstorm words that you would like students to associate with your society, both on and off social media. So whether it's, your society is approachable, your society, say if you're, meditation, you want it to be calming. If you want it, if you're, I don't know, performing arts society, you might want it to be a bit brash and bold, a bit lively. If you're a comedy sock, you might want it to be a bit funny, stuff like that. So real basic things, and like sometimes it seems like a basic exercise, but sometimes they can be the most useful in terms of kind of deciding maybe if you're taking over a society that maybe has been in a bit of a rut for a few years. It can be a really useful method of kind of understanding how you're going to drive it forward, and it can also be a really great kind of starting point to kind of bounce everything back to. So yeah, I'd really recommend it. It's a fantastic exercise. We did it ourselves in the CSC this year. We do it every few years, I think, to kind of really understand, who are we? How do we want to be perceived? By our online presence. What do we want it to mean? And I think it really comes down to, we want to be approachable, but we also kind of really want to elevate the voices of students and societies within college and on campus. And so everything kind of comes back to that. So understanding really what is central to your society, and it's not just, we're knit socks, if we like knitting, but rather it's what people can get from coming to knit sock, or the vibe that you want to give off, I guess, is a very basic way to say it. And so yeah, so by understanding the voice of the society, you continue to use this to inform how you operate on social media. So it can be really helpful in that point, and can be really useful in terms of going back and having those building blocks to constantly refer back to. And I think it will really be a great exercise in terms of kind of building for the rest of the year. Especially say if your society has maybe changed its format of how it operates due to COVID, it might be a bit different. or maybe you're planning on doing things a bit differently this year than how you did last year. So yeah, even if you're not planning on really changing anything, it can be a really useful exercise, I think, for committees to do, especially if there's a lot of new people on the committee, to really go back to and kind of for everyone to be on the same page of what the society is, what you do, and what you want people to kind of step away feeling once they've gone to an event with your society, or once they've seen a story from your society or a piece of content online. So then going on from there, there's, I mean, I'm sure everyone knows these social media platforms. But in terms of kind of like what each of them can bring, I think they all require very different inputs and they can come with very different outputs. So for instance, Instagram, we really noticed in the last year, I think during Freshers Week, the many people following the CSC on Instagram somewhat doubled. And I think it had never done something like that before. So it was kind of a demographic shift of, it used to always be Facebook, but now you could really see the tide changing towards Instagram. So really interesting in terms of Instagram is now kind of the place in which, societies are really operating with, or not operating, but interacting with their members. So it's really popular with current students. It's a great way of getting information out there. There are kind of various different forms of getting information out there between like posts, or, you can have stories and you can have Q&As. And it's a very interactive platform. I'm sure we all know it. And so, yeah, I'd say Instagram is really kind of your bread and butter of where you want to be interacting with your own society members. Beyond that, Twitter, it's not used as much by students in a way that, say, Instagram or Facebook will be used. But still, it's a great place to interact with college and third-party accounts. So college, say like the Global Room or the Alumni Office, they're fantastic with regards to interacting with societies, with reacting or interacting with societies via Twitter. And it can be a great way as well for even like stakeholders within the college or stakeholders outside of the college to really see what you're doing in your society. And it can be a really great platform for kind of building your own brand outside of the main, membership or student body. So that can be really, really useful. And then Facebook, for older societies who might have like a huge presence on Facebook, it's a really great place to interact with alumni. And I think that's really useful, especially from, say, a TMT perspective, when we were selling shows. A lot of alumni would still be interacting with the page, and it was a great way to, also interact with the, alumni office and kind of ask them to share content. It's definitely kind of Facebook's migrated to kind of an older generation. So it can be a really great way to interact with alumni if that's something that your society wants to do or continues to do or strives to do. And then TikTok, I don't really think anyone's necessarily cracked the code on how societies, kind of act on TikTok. I know that the Archaeology Society had some good TikToks last year, but I think apart from that, it's still sort of in its infancy with societies kind of interacting with it. But I'm sure it'll be something now in the next year that will become ever increasingly popular. So I can't really give much information on that other than like it's, we all know it, it's short form video content. But again, it kind of requires different inputs and it has different outputs. So for instance, Facebook, when it was really popular a few years ago, was a great place to have groups. If you have if you're like players and you have an ENTS subcommittee, it can be a great place to kind of organize there. Instagram can be a great place to get, photos from your event out. Twitter can be a great place to get quick, snappy announcements out. And I think TikTok, I guess we'll wait and see. It's up to you guys. Yeah. So then one massive thing about maximizing your society's presence, I think, comes down to content creation. So what I mean when I say content creation is essentially the materials that make up your posts, your stories, your tweets, your TikToks. And it should really be the product of the brainstorming session that you took to kind of understand the voice of your society. And really transforming it then into a visual, mainly visual, but then also kind of like a, text-based element as well. It might take some trial and error to get it right, but, I definitely encourage it in terms of kind of, say from a PRO perspective, kind of understanding, what looks best or what you think is best for the society and going through drafts and edits, and kind of understanding, okay, this might work the best. And then like it can be change in a sort of theme and variation way to kind of suit different events. But it's all kind of speaking the same language, and it kind of ties together what we came up with in the kind of society voice brainstorm. So for instance, like meditation, if you want to kind of give like a calming feel, you might use like more pastel tone colors or something. But if you want to do something a bit more brash, you might do something a bit brighter and a bit more I don't know, something a bit brighter and a bit deeper color, something like that. It's those sort of elements that kind of translate your brand into a visual piece. And then in terms of bringing it then into text, I think that's quite self-explanatory. And then so the apps that I would recommend you use for content creation, especially if it's just kind of a graphic, would definitely be Canva. Canva is a great one. It's very easy to use for beginners. It's free to the best of my knowledge. I believe there are like some pro or like upgrade elements, but I'm pretty sure it is free. Photoshop, it's not free. I know that there is a student subscription to Adobe Creative Suites that is substantially cheaper than it would usually be. Otherwise, it is available in the CSE offices. I don't know myself if they're actually going to be open this year, in the same way they were in years previous. But they do have Adobe Creative Suites on the computers in there. And then PicMonkey as well. It was something I used years and years ago. But again, it's just, a solid platform that you can use. It's free. And it can be really useful in the creation of graphics. And, they all involve a certain amount of kind of like getting to know the system. And, it's something that I really believe PROs should dedicate some time to doing before they go into the academic year. To be somewhat proficient in it, in the same way that you would expect a treasurer to be somewhat proficient in Google Sheets or Excel. Because at the end of the day, I think the PRO's job really comes down to, looking out for the social media and being the one to really promote the society's presence on campus. So I think, you don't need to have the best graphics in the world, but at the same time, it doesn't take a lot of prep to create something that looks clean and gets the information out clearly. I think an important thing to then consider, especially if you're new to kind of graphic design or creating content, is to understand the different platforms in terms of ratio and design. Twitter has a different photo ratio to Instagram, and say a Facebook cover photo is different. The ratio of, an Instagram story is probably different to that of a TikTok. These things are also changing all the time. I would include them, except the user interfaces are constantly being changed and upgraded. So, you can put one thing in here, but it might be different next week. So the best way to do it is just Google what the dimensions are at any given time and kind of work on it from there. I think the key is to not overload a graphic with information. I think that's one thing about kind of keeping your presence, concise and clean online, in terms of, I think it's important to have the name of your society, the title of the event, when, where, and maybe entry fee or who you're collaborating with, and then the CSC logo or something like that. If people want to, don't include absolutely every single detail about your event in a graphic. Keep in mind that even though you might be creating it on a desktop screen, people are most likely going to be reading it on a phone. So, keep in mind that the text is going to be smaller. And as well, it might just look really messy to the eye, to the point where someone mightn't actually bother to read it. If people want to learn more information, put in the caption, they will search out the information. And I think you have to trust, the people who are viewing the content as well, that they will search out the information if they really want to see it. So I think like that's a really important point as well, in terms that you don't have to overload a post. And I think as well that when it comes to creating something like captions, don't just do a block of text, break it up into paragraphs, keep it concise, but also be creative as well at the same time. I mean, like, you're not, a bank, you're a student society, come on. And then of course, like, then when it comes to actually building your brand on social media, I think there are like three really important points. Interactions with the users. So, like and reply to comments, reply to direct messages, tagged post, share a story if someone's, tagged your society in it, and really show that you're interacting with your society members and you're building that community. And I think that's really important, especially in the last year when in-person events have been, such a luxury, or actually just even not there at all at many points, that building this connection online for all societies is the only real way to build these connections. and build this community from an online presence. And I think really when it comes to, say, direct messages, a lot of people are more likely to actually like DM and Instagram than they are to email the society page. And I think as well, having a kind of customer service kind of reply is, great in terms of, adding to the professionalism of it, signing it off with whoever's name is it replying. So when I'd be replying on like the TMT Instagram, I'd always say like, all the best, Jack, just to know that there's a name, that there's a person that you're actually talking to rather than just this anonymous Instagram account. And then I think as well, like making it personable, like brings that element of, community to another sense. And then consistency. So for example, like if you're having a weekly event, such as, players have their event every Wednesday. I'm not sure if players do this, but like something like announcing the event at the same time every week. People might know it, but they might, subconsciously actually expect to see it on like a Sunday afternoon or something like that. And I think this goes as well for the content you're creating. I think, it doesn't all have to look the same. I wouldn't say that, but at the same time, I feel like people should be able to look at, if you're doing your branding A1, people should be able to look at your content and go, oh, well, they're completely different, but they might be from the same society because it has these certain elements involved. I think DU Dance were a fantastic society for that last year. They did it really, really well. All the posts look different to a certain extent, but you could all tell that they were from DU Dance. And they were fantastic. And then that kind of feeds into another thing as well, like creativeness, like have fun, like creating the content for social media and be inventive. Like if you see someone doing something really inventive, steal it, like do it yourself, why not? Again, like it's student societies, have fun with it. And yeah, I'd also say, I'd caution the fact that as well, that you are representing a society at the end of the day, which is in turn, some people might view that as representing college, in the sense that just be careful. Don't just be careful in terms of tone of what you're posting, and it is the internet and it's easily accessible everywhere, so just don't be posting absolutely anything. And so then I was kind of thinking like how best to kind of give an example of maybe how to promote along like an event like in person. So I was the lead on the promotion of G-Square Superstar back in 2020. It was the Team T annual show that year, which unfortunately was cancelled due to COVID at the last minute. And so I just thought I'd maybe use it as kind of like an example of how to structure the promotion of an event online, as maybe this is something that will be coming back to this year. And maybe some people mightn't have any experience of, if say you started first year last year, in terms of kind of like rolling out the promotion of an event online and how that works, and the ins and outs of it, and kind of like the planning tips that you might want to include when it comes down to actually, executing an event promotion online. Yeah. So I'd really say split your planning into two stages. You're going to want to split your planning into a content creation stage and a content release stage. So for content creation, you're going to want to do this like with a good bit of time left before you're actually in your publishing stage. So with content creation, that means you're taking the photography, you're doing the videography, you're working on the branding, so that all of that is locked away and done before you ever get into content release. I'd say when you're in your content creation phase, take as much video as possible, take as much photographs as possible, work around the branding as much as you want. And that's really your time to experiment, so you're not kind of facing the demands, or you're not facing the kind of time deadlines that you will be if you were doing it like a week before you're announcing or something like that. So really take the time to develop something. And for TMT, this would have been like our big event of the year. This could be applicable if you're hosting a ball, or if you're hosting an intervarsities, or you're hosting like a massive like week-long collaboration with like various different societies, in which case in terms of content creation, you're also going to want to look at stakeholder management in terms of who's doing what, especially when it comes to online and graphics and whatnot, and really utilizing all your resources to the best of your abilities. And then content release is another major stage. So really looking at how you're going to publish, the content that you've actually created. And I think it's a prime opportunity, say, if you want to, say, build hype for an event. For us, what we would do, especially in the lead into kind of like the main show, is that we'd tease the launch event, and from the launch event, that would then like slingshot us into the actual production. So yeah, kind of having an idea of what you're publishing every single day. I wouldn't say you necessarily have to schedule the posts, but having an idea and having it ready to go, I think is really, really useful. Of course, the reason why I say I wouldn't necessarily schedule the posts is because you might schedule them a few weeks in advance, and then for all you know, something could come up on the day. So say if you sell out tickets for your ball, or if an event has been, postponed or cancelled, or the dates have been changed or something like that, you're going to want it to be responsive, and then you don't want to then accidentally post something that you had scheduled a few weeks back that completely contradicts what you just said. So I think like being mindful of what you're posting and when you're posting it, but publishing it in real time, I would say, unless of course it's a video that you want to release at like a specific time across platforms or something like that. And then I'd say understand the language and the content of your branding. So understanding, what color schemes you're going to go for, what are your primary fonts, and are there sub campaigns within the campaign itself. So that might be if you're say having a week-long event that's like a major society collaboration, is there something within that you really want to push forward, and how is that branding then going to speak to the branding of the overall event? And then I'd say, plan publishing of content in the run-up to event. When do you announce the launch? Do you need to have a second launch? I thought this was something that a friend taught me a few years ago, the idea of the second launch, which can really then push your event into the final week or into the final few days, because it can be tiring in terms of, posting relatively the same, message day in, day out. So really having something maybe like a video to kind of push it into, the last few days. And then I think as well, maybe having something like a competition or, something like that will create a bit more hype than rather than just like, posting a photo or posting a graphic or posting a story. Also, I mean, like, it could be something as creative as, someone doing a takeover, or someone like showing behind the scenes the planning process. And again, like, this isn't just applicable to say like an event like a show, but also like a ball or like a week-long event or an InterVarsity, any of such. And so then again, if it's a multi-day event, you have content planned beyond the first day. And I think that's really important, because I think a lot of people can see a day such as the first day or the launch day is kind of like the be all end all, but I think, you have to keep that momentum up as a week long or 2, 3, 4 day long event is ongoing. So yeah. And then I'd say tips, just going beyond that, if you're like using Photoshop, set up blank templates with your branding, it can be really useful in creating quick posts. So for instance, if there's, change time or dates, or, there's only 40 tickets left for a certain performance, or a certain event is sold out, or you've been postponed due to a pandemic, it's really easy to just like, make up something really quickly. And then I think as well, understand what promotion means on different social media platforms for your event. So for us, posting on Facebook, we'd use that as a means of reaching like an alumni community. If we're promoting it on Twitter, we know that, say, there's a chance that, the TCD office or, Global Room will like share it. And then that will generate kind of like more ticket sales for the event. Of course, like not every event kind of like demands maybe third party sharing or something like that to get it out. Like a lot of times you are just promoting within the college, but at the same time, like you never know who you're going to reach. Like if a post on Twitter makes one more person come to the event, then it was worth it. I think like that's what you really have to, that's the mindset that you really have to have. If you put in work for a post and only a single person comes, that was still successful because it still convinced someone to come to an event. And especially I think in the last year, even if like only a few people show up to a Zoom call or something on a weekly basis, for a lot of people, that could be the Zoom call that they look forward to all week. And I think if, convinced one person to come who might need to come that week, then it was successful. And then I think as well, if you can run a competition, if you're doing an event, it generates a lot of organic traffic to your posts and pages. In terms of paid promotion, I wouldn't really recommend it. I just don't think it's necessarily the best for college events. Definitely if you're doing something professionally in the outside real world, but I just don't really think it necessarily works all that well if you're running an event within college. I think you really have to consider what your aims are if you're going to be going for like paid promotional push, because obviously there's a financial tie to it. Photos with graphics have much better traction than just graphic posts. And the same can be said for videos. So say if you've been posting 6 photos in a row and you post a video, the video is going to get a lot more traction. That's something to do with algorithms. I don't really know how they work. So yeah. And then always proofread posts for typos. You can edit them on Facebook and Instagram, but you can't edit them on Twitter. So just make sure the information is clearly laid out. Again, before you post something, sit back and say, if I had absolutely no idea what this event was about, would I be able to interpret it and make sense of what's going on? And I think that's a really useful tip. Keep it concise, keep the information clear, keep the main information to the top of the post. DU players presents blah, blah, blah. Where is it? When is it? How much are tickets? Brief bio of the event, and then maybe some other info that you might just need to include. And so then if there are any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them. So yeah, if anybody has them, just unmute yourself and ask away, or put them into the chat box as well. Yeah.
Hi, what kind of program did you use when you were making the posts for TMT?
So I used Photoshop. I just had it because I had it for work previously in the past. It takes a bit of getting used to in terms of kind of building up your own proficiency over time. I did find it really useful, but it can take a bit of time to kind of really find your groove within it. But I'd say once you have it, it's really worth it in terms of the content that you can produce. But yeah, again, apps like Canva and stuff like that are still a lot easier to use and cheaper as well. So I only had Photoshop because of the work that I was doing, so I don't necessarily encourage people to spend the money on it, but it's the industry best anyway, creating graphics and stuff like that, as is the Adobe App Illustrator as well. So yeah.
Thank you.
No problem. Any other questions? Yeah, so in terms of YouTube, yeah, I guess at the end of the day, you're going to just want to make sure that you're going to want to think about your audience. So is your audience your members? Do you want to kind of maybe break out beyond that or something like that? Or do you want to interact with other societies that are similar to yours elsewhere? I'd say, if you are going to use something like YouTube, the best place to probably promote it is, again, through your other social medias, but also I'd say through your weekly email to your members. And as well, I think maybe opening it up to having different people involved, and maybe having a means of the society members being able to contribute to what you're posting on the YouTube account, might have a good way in terms of maximizing your presence within the campus. And yeah, it isn't really a platform that many societies use. A lot of societies would use it, say, to upload videos that they can then post on, say, something like a website. But yeah, not a lot of societies have actually used it, but I'd say really think about what you want to achieve from it and who you want to interact with it, I would say the best way to probably reach out to your members would definitely be through your weekly email, or through the social media that you've developed through Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, if that answers your question. Fab. And so, any other questions? Going once, going twice. Okay, cool. I think that's it. Got over and done within half an hour, so class. So yeah, thank you all so much for coming along. I hope this was helpful. This was recorded, so I'm sure Emma will post it somewhere, and I might send out a PowerPoint presentation as well if she wants to send it on with it. So yeah, thank you guys all so much for joining, and yeah, enjoy your evening. Thank you so much.